This is the May 10th meeting of the Senate Finance Committee. The committee will be in order. We have a quorum present. Senate File 5430, Senator Mann, Minnesota paid leave law modifications. And Senator Mann, welcome to the committee, and go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. So this is the largely technical bill for paid leave. We discussed the merits of such a program and how to best deliver such a program last year. This year, we are here to fine-tune its execution. We added definitions and clarified processes. We added appeals language and data privacy piece that we went through in judiciary. We clarified the process for private plans, which we went through in commerce. We also changed how we treat the first week due to some disagreements with the administration. We have come up with a compromise, and on that note, Mr. Chair, I do have an amendment, the A15, I would like to introduce today that will sunset the PTO by language, so that after a smooth rollout of the program, we can bring the program back to its original intent that everyone had agreed to in the first place. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and Senator Murphy, maybe we take the amendment right away. So Senator Murphy moves the A15 amendment. Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair Marty, and thank you, Senator Mann, for bringing the bill forward with some improvements. I appreciate that. So the sunset that you're putting on here, so it goes into effect January of 26 and sunsets in 27, and that is subdivision 6. And is that the first week provision, or what? Can you just explain what section you're sunsetting?
Yeah, so we put in a PTO buy down for the first week for the first year, and we're sunsetting that PTO buy down so that after 2027, the program is 12 weeks fully paid.
So that would affect the union existing contracts. Is that what that is?
No, Mr. Chair.
Senator Mann, go ahead. If you have, nothing, okay. Is there further discussion of the A15? If not, all those in, excuse me, if not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Ms. Grunwald-Nolden, are you ready to go through the spreadsheet?
Mr. Chair and members, yep, I'm prepared.
And you can do the fiscal note or the spreadsheet. Which would you rather do first?
I can start with the spreadsheet,
Okay.
and then I can point out some things on the fiscal note. So the spreadsheet I'll be walking through is titled Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance, timestamped 4:32 p.m. And this is showing the changes as proposed in Senate File 5430 prior to the A15 amendment. So the two changes here are going to be shown in the Family and Medical Benefit Insurance Fund. And these numbers are mirroring the numbers that show up in the fiscal note. And let's see. The tracking that is being shown is being measured against the October actuarial study base instead of the February forecast. And this base includes an assumption of 0.78% premium rate and first week not paid. So any changes being shown in the spreadsheet and the fiscal note are any changes above those assumptions. So I'll point out on lines 5 through 7, the expenditure changes in the FMBI account. First, with the PTO provision in the first week, there's a change of $93.65 million in fiscal year 26-27. And then other expenditures for administration, a change of $6.5 million in fiscal year 26-27. There's also a change in revenues for premium collection. So on line 12, it's a increase of revenue of $114.65 million in fiscal year 26-27, and a small increase due to the small employer premium relief provision of $359,000 in fiscal year 26-27. So taking the expenditures and revenues together, there's a net impact savings of $5.22 million in fiscal year '26 and $9.639 million in fiscal year '27, and that shows up on line 19. So it's a short spreadsheet, but like I said, this is mirroring the changes to the FMBI fund in the fiscal note. And Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I can point out some important pages in the fiscal note if the committee would like that.
Chair,
Senator Draheim.
can we just get an explanation why we didn't use the forecast? Can you explain what the difference was between the 2023 study and then the November forecast and why that was used?
Mr. Chair, Senator Draheim, that was a choice made by Department of Employment and Economic Development. So I may phone a friend for that question, if anybody from the agency is able to speak on it.
I just, don't we normally use the latest forecast? And it's just a little unusual. Are we talking dollars or millions in difference? I just like a little explanation why.
Mr. Chair and Senator Draheim, as a typical matter, all pricing in a fiscal note is measured against the most recent forecast. There are some unique circumstances here that I think it would be best addressed to the agency. I think there is certainly something for you all to discuss there.
Welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself before going ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Evan Rowe. I'm Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And Senator Draheim, I think to what Mr. Naumann was saying earlier, there are several, there are a few different provisions, obviously, in this bill. And I think part of what we were trying to make sure is that you have a reasonable baseline to compare things against. If you change multiple variables, it can be kind of difficult to have a solid basis for comparison. So the most recent, I think in October, per Chapter 59, per the provisions of Chapter 59, the actuarial study was submitted to the legislative library, reference library, as well as members here. And I think essentially that provided the most up-to-date set of projections. It provided the most up-to-date set of forecasts around what the anticipated costs of the program would be, and that was what MMB recommends using in the February forecast and the November forecast as well. So the idea is we would use that as the baseline to provide a consistent basis, and then various program provisions could be measured against that baseline to make comparisons easier. In the sense that the Senate and the House have different positions, that would enable a simpler and more meaningful comparison. Other comparisons are also valid, and I think the actuarial analysis submitted back in October elucidates some of those elements as well.
Senator Draheim.
So how big a difference was the October actuarial? What report was that? That was an outside firm did that, right? And then, so, I mean, what are we looking at? The differences if you ran both the February forecast versus the October outside actuarial report?
Mr. Rowe.
I guess, Mr. Chair, Senator Draheim, I guess the question would just be, what would you seek to, what is the comparison that you would like to draw, right? I guess because there's a few different things, there would be a few different items changing.
Yeah, try. Mr. Naumann.
Mr. Chair, and I think the question for senators here is traditionally this committee is accustomed to doing a comparison to what the last time it looked at this issue was in the previous session. So as I understand what Senator Draheim is inquiring about is a comparison to what the committee saw as the base at the time. There has been an intervening event, the actuarial study, and so Mr. Rowe, I think maybe what the committee is simply asking is, please draw a comparison for us, recognizing there's the week that's in contention, and that would be subsumed into the conversation. But there's also the premium rate. And I think what Senator Draheim is really asking is, tell us about that intervening event, the actuarial study, and how that changed the rate in the original from the original conversation that the committee, when the committee last discussed this issue.
Thank you.
Mr.
Rowe,
Chair.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Chair, Senator Draheim. So I guess looking at the program without changes, maybe is perhaps where we could start. The fiscal, the 2023 fiscal note, which used a different methodology, kind of used a different set of forecasting tools, projected that a premium rate of 0.70% and, annual benefits payments of starting around, just looking at the note, around 1.137 billion in fiscal 26 was that projection. The actuarial analysis, which was submitted to the legislature in October, for that same with the same provisions, forecasted that an initial rate of 0.78% and annual benefit payments of 1.313 billion were the elements in question there. This bill proposes additional changes that are then modeled from that second baseline as part of from that baseline as part of the fiscal note that you have in front of you. Does that answer the question, or is there other pieces that would be helpful?
Go ahead.
Chair,
Senator.
thank you. I'm just trying to wrap my head, obviously it's my first year in finance. I thought the bill we had passed was the other rate, and the assumptions that we're using here is a higher rate. And I thought we did budgeting off of what the statute says or what the bills we passed were. So, and as drafted, I thought the rate was the old rate, and now we have a new rate. And I was just trying to start at the beginning and kind of get at why the numbers are different, and who changed the numbers, and was that an agency decision? So I just more explanation, Chair, if we could.
Yes.
I mean, just so I can understand. I know it doesn't go into effect today, but I think that's our job here on the committee. So thanks.
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, appreciate the question. I think, so Chapter 59 also instructs the agency to reset the premium rate based on the results of the October 23 actuarial analysis. Now, again, I think I think part of what we're attempting to do in this fiscal note is to provide a consistent base against which the various program options under this Senate file could be compared. Again, I think the actuary's recommendation, and this is on page 13 of the October 2023 actuarial analysis, they recommended an initial premium rate of 0.78%. So that again is given the I think given that is the most recent analysis that we have access to, given that is an independent an analysis undertaken and completed by qualified independent actuaries. That was why we chose, for the purposes of this fiscal note, to use that as the baseline. And again, I think as far as the PTO, the provisions contained within this fiscal note, there would be a modest increase in overall expected benefit payments and the required revenues to be able to balance out the fund as part of the original bill as was placed before the committee. Again, there are different pieces that are moving. So I think you can take different places as your baseline. We were just trying to provide a consistent one for folks' understanding.
Senator Draheim, then Senator Murphy.
Thank you. And I guess, Senator Mann, when you passed your original bill, I thought it was a set rate for the first year. And then after that, it could be reviewed and adjusted as needed. Do you remember what was in the original bill?
Senator Mann.
Mr. Chair, so the intent was to have a set rate for that first year, but we did have an amendment when we added the actuarial analysis language that DEED could go back and change it if they needed to.
In the first year? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Senator Murphy, then Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. and this is a question for Deed. This is also my first term on the Finance Committee, but have been around a bit. And legislators persistently challenge fiscal notes and the fiscal note process in order to try and advance a goal that they are intending to advance. And we're cautioned all the time by our fiscal staff to adhere to the processes that are put in place so that they're standardized, so they're reliable, and so we're not manipulating the policy process or the budgeting process to achieve a goal that doesn't adhere to a process that Minnesotans can trust. And so I am curious if it is the practice of Deed to deviate in the way that you're describing now, and using the actuarial analysis as a foundation for what we're seeing here today, or if this is an aberration in this case.
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Murphy, I think that most bills do not have the number of different variables that you might have involved here. So, this was not a decision solely undertaken by the agency. Certainly, we consulted with the Legislative Budget Office, which signs off on fiscal notes, as well as and the feedback that was provided through that process. Again, and given the number of just variables involved, I think the sense was you picking a baseline to allow a consistent comparison is the best way here. You could choose a different baseline. That's reasonable. But just given that Section 41 of Chapter 59 provides the agency with the authority to reset premium rates based on the results of the October actuarial analysis, given that we have a new actuarial analysis which in many ways superseded the fiscal note from 2023, and then given the proposed changes in the various bills, it was our sense that this would be the best way to provide the information to members. Of course, the other thing I would just note is all the underlying source data are available in the sense of that the actuarial analyses are public, is a public data point. So it really is meant to try to provide the best information and the best point of comparison for members. Naturally, if members disagree, the source data are available, and one could I think take an alternative perspective, but that was truly the intent. And again, I think this bill just has this law just has more moving parts than a typical piece, and I think we were just trying to do our best job of figuring out how you could show changes in a legible and understandable way.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that explanation for the record. I think it's important that it's on the record. I would not, from my perspective at least, think it would be a good practice for us to deviate from the standard practice. And of course, we often pass complicated pieces of legislation here. And we all talk about that a lot, but it isn't the reason necessarily that we deviate from our standard practices. And then a question for you, Senator Mann. In the amendment that you passed, you made it clear that with the sunset, we would restore a full first week paid. Can you reiterate that for me, please?
Mr. Chair. So we have language in the bill right now that has a PTO buy down for that first week. So if you have greater than 120 hours, you have to buy down to 80. We will leave nobody with less than 80 hours. This was a compromise that was negotiated between us and the administration because the administration had read the original bill as completely unpaid for that first week, and we all know that unpaid leave doesn't work. We already have unpaid leave. People cannot take leave if it's unpaid. So we come up with this language. Of course, it is not what we had agreed with every single stakeholder in the original bill negotiations when we all agreed to 12 paid weeks. And so because we had to come up with this solution for now, today we will sunset that language so that we can bring the bill back to its original intent of 12 paid weeks.
Thank you, Senator Mann.
I want to restate what Senator Draheim and Senator Murphy said, and I think that it's very important that we have a consistent base on our fiscal notes just so that we can have, so we can know, because it is complex, yes, but it's important to know what all changes and not take a midpoint somewhere else from something else. So I think I want to express the same concern with the agency, because I think that's not the way we do it here. Senator Pratt, then Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I've got the same concern in that, as we look at the fiscal note, using a basis of 0.78 and then increasing the rate to 0.82, looks like a 4 basis point jump instead of a 12 basis point jump, and that's a significant difference. I would just, Mr. Rose talked a couple of times about Chapter 59, Section 41, and I've gone to look at that. Mr. Rowe, can you point out to me where in that section you have the authority?
Mr. Rowe, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, that would be Section C of Section 4, or Clause C. I'm not sure what the legal word is. Paragraph C of Section 41.
I'm sorry, which section?
Paragraph C of Section 41.
So paragraph C of, I'm on subdivision 41?
It's in, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I think I'm looking at the wrong, that's why I ask.
It's, Mr. Chair, if I may, it's Chapter 59, so it's the session law rather than the statute.
I'm in Section 59. I was just on subdivision 41 instead of Section 41. Oh, thank you. So, Mr. Chair, it talks about subject to the limitations of Minnesota statutes 268B.14, paragraph 7, which states that the department may not make those changes until July of 2026, effective January 2027. Is there anybody from MMB here?
We have LBO people here if you want.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering what was built into the forecast? Was a 0.78 basis built into the forecast, or was a 0.70 basis built into the forecast?
Mr. Rowe, go ahead.
I could attempt, Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I could attempt to speak on behalf of MMB, just in the sense that, since we've had some conversations with them, the Family and Medical Benefits Insurance account is an enterprise fund, and MMB doesn't typically forecast enterprise funds since it's a self-contained fund. I think MMB would be able to do a forecast for the fund statement in the interim, but I think the point there is since this is sort of a self-contained fund, it is generally not part of that forecasting process.
Mr. Chair, could I ask Mr. Larson to come up, please?
Welcome to the committee, Mr. Larson.
Mr. Chair, for the record, my name is Christian Larson, Director of the Legislative Budget Office.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Larson, who thought one little paragraph would cause such a kerfuffle here? But, we've heard Senator Murphy and Senator Marty talk about making sure we adhere to our standards. I'm assuming from this paragraph, it's the Legislative Budget Office's perspective that we've deviated from that standard?
Mr. Larson.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, so we did have extensive conversations with the agency about this. So if we think about what a fiscal note is, it's what is current law and is measuring from current law. DEED is making the assumption that under current law, they have this authority to, under the chapter that Mr. Rowe referenced, that they have the authority to change the premium rate in year one. And therefore, that would be current law if they would make the decision to do that. And so that's where they're measuring from. And so that's why that was carried in the fiscal note, that they're stating they have this authority. We went back and forth on, do they have this authority? They're confident they do, and this is how they would apply the law.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Pratt, go ahead.
So, Mr. Larson, if I look at Section 41, paragraph C, it says, in consultation with the Commissioner of Management and Budget, must adjust the premium rate to make the program actuarially sound, subject to the limitations in Minnesota statutes 268B.14, subdivision 7, paragraph B. And when I look at paragraph B, well, when I look at Section 7 in general, it says beginning January 1st, 2027, and by July 31st of each calendar year thereafter, the commissioner must adjust the premium rates using the formula. Can you point to me where in that section, since it's being limited by subdivision 7, where it gives the, or maybe this is for Mr. Rowe, where that gives you the authority then to modify the rate in the first year, or change the basis for the fiscal note purposes so that the increase looks like a four basis point change instead of a 12 basis point change?
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I think the limitation contained within Section 41 is primarily to note that within the subdivision 7 of 268B.14 subjects the premium rate to a cap of 1.2% of taxable wages. So our understanding of the limitation that is enumerated in Section 41 is to instruct the agency based on the actuarial analysis that the limitation cannot exceed 1.2% of taxable wages.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But Mr. Rowe, right above that, which is in context of this citation, it clearly states beginning January 1, 2027, and by July 31 of each year thereafter. It seems pretty clear to me that there wasn't a statutory authority to change the basis. But even more so disturbing to me is the fact that by changing the basis, we change the perceived impact of the actuarial study, right? Because you're proposing a premium of 0.82 off a basis of 0.78 versus a basis of 0.7. And so what this committee should be seeing is a change of 12 basis points, not 4 basis points. You basically are saying that the net impact is a third of what it truly is. And that's the concern that I have when I'm looking at this fiscal note.
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I'm not sure there's a question, but I guess I would just respond to say, again, the intent of the fiscal note is that, again, I would just say to the point, we do believe that there is, the limitation that is contained within subdivision 7 is primarily intended to ensure that the agency, that in Section 41, that the agency adheres to the 1.2% premium cap. I think the clear legislative intent of Section 41 was to give the agency the authority to reset the premium rate based on the results of the actuarial study, which was the subject of substantial legislative debate last year. And I guess certainly, and again, our intention in developing this fiscal note was to provide a clear basis for comparison. I understand, one could interpret the baseline differently, and based on one's reading of the law. It's certainly, all the source data are public. It's all available. The information from the actuarial study is published with the legislative reference library. It's all there. So I guess I would just say the intention is to try to take a complicated matter of policy, provide the best baseline. It's also reasonable for folks to take other baselines and interpret the policy debate in the way that in other ways. we were simply trying to do the best that we could to take a complicated subject matter and make sure that there could be a meaningful policy conversation on the subject.
Mr. Larson.
Senator Marty and Senator Pratt, one thing I think is helpful to think about this in terms of the revenue. So we had extensive conversations about a first-year assumption about 0.7%, and that seeming to be the clear expectation and in the law. So we had those conversations. I think in terms of making sure that we're capturing the change in revenue from what would have been to what it is and how we're measuring that and make sure we're not capturing everything, there's a nuance in that the current law with the current formula would have more variability. And so under the actuarial analysis provided using current law with the first year 0.7, that's also provided in the actuarial analysis. So the first year is 0.7% in the actual analysis as provided in October. It jumps to 0.92% the next year as it follows the formula, and then it drops down to 0.78. So if you were to take out the 0.7, if you take the impact of 0.7 to 0.92, you're really having a bigger impact, as you're saying, in year one, and then actually a decrease in impact from year two. And so it's not a perfect wash. There's actually a little bit of less premium paid under this flat line 0.78 assumption over 3 years in the fiscal note. And so if you take the 3 years combined, that number kind of evens out. But to your point, current law seems to stay 0.7. Agencies making the case that they have the ability to change that. It influences how you can think about the fiscal note. But over a 3-year period, understanding how much premium is paid does even out.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Larson. I remember from the Milliman report that there was quite a bit of variability. I'm kind of interested because on line 44.5 of the bill, section 42, it says the commissioner may adjust the annual premium rates pursuant to this section prior to January 1, 2026, and by July 31st, 2026, and then every July 31st thereafter. It seems to me that that would have been the statutory authority to make the change from on the basis. Mr. Larson, if 0.7 were the basis, couldn't the agency have done a change reflecting the 0.82 and how and the smoother premium rate going forward based on the language in the bill, but at least show the delta from current law?
Mr. Larson, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'm not, and Senator Pratt, I'm not sure that's, I'm not the lawyer. I think maybe Senate counsel might best be able to represent that. But I think to answer the bigger question, that each year they now have to go back and look. And so the actual analysis will be run after each year. And so what's assumed in the actual analysis right now is likely not going to be an impact, because we'll have a year of inputs that say, what the actual analysis came out at the time said if the first year was 0.7, the next year would jump to 0.92. Now, what actually happens will influence that up or down, and it could be closer to 0.82. The chances are, if you keep it lower the first year, it is going to inherently go up higher the next year, where if you increase it to the 0.78, then the variability is probably less, I think is the understanding and how I read the actuarial analysis. But in terms of the authority, I would certainly turn it over to counsel or whoever else might want to speak to that.
Ms. Stengel, do you want to comment, or you don't know? Okay. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Mr. Chair, I think there was a way to be able to show a change to 0.78 and 0.82 without changing the basis. And to one, follow the standards that we've always followed. Two, to follow the numbers that were in the forecast. And I think three, to have the fiscal note truly reflect the changes of the bill. I'm extremely concerned that we've got the agency reading into this. And there must have been some concern that they didn't have the statutory authority, or we wouldn't have Section 42 in the bill that explicitly gives them the authority to make that change. And they could have made that change in the fiscal note. They could have reflected it based on the 0.7 basis. But they chose to take that statutory authority ahead of the bill passing. And, you know, I think from what I'm hearing from Mr. Larson and Mr. Rowe, both cause me concern that Deed's fiscal note is not as straightforward as it should be. I understand the rationale. I understand the fact that, you know, we on this side of the aisle made the case last year that we thought the premium rate was going to be too low, and the Milliman study validated that. But that doesn't, looking at the section, Chapter 59, Section 41, and the bill and current statute, I don't see where Deed had the statutory authority to just change the underlying assumption. The fiscal note should be done to current statutory language, and shouldn't be presuming that Section 42 of the bill is adopted. And I guess, Mr. Chair, I'd ask one question. Mr. Rowe, how would this fiscal note change? And I think this goes to a question Senator Drahenheim asked. How would this fiscal note change if we had used the 0.7 and costed in the adjustment to 0.78?
Mr. Rowe or Mr. Larson?
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I would, I think probably the simplest way to do it would be if one compared in the actuarial, if you looked at the actuarial analysis from, I think, page 12 of that of the October 2023 actuarial analysis. Note provides, the summary tables around the contribution rate if it was set at 0.70% for the first year. And that would provide the basis, I think that would provide the basis for comparison of revenues between that and the 0.82%.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. And I agree, we could probably make that presumption, but Milliman is working off of data. We've now got 6 months of new data, new numbers of working Minnesotans, new numbers of premium that's expected to be collected. The fiscal note is our official standard process, right? I shouldn't have to go back to Milliman and factor in what that cost would be. It should be reflected in the fiscal note. That's the concern I have. And I think Mr. Rowe, I just think it's inappropriate to be asking this committee to go back and try to figure out on an actuarial study that lays out several scenarios, to pick the one scenario that you happen to think we should be using. We should be able to see what that impact is in the fiscal note, so we're all on the same page, all using the same standard as Senator Murphy indicated. Mr. Chair, I'd like to see a new fiscal note come through that actually shows the true cost of the bill.
Mr. Larson, any thoughts about, I think you share the concern of the committee that we should be having it based on the same standard that we've always done.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, we would need to go and it really comes down to are they applying current law? And if it's a fair assumption that they have the authority in the current law to make the assumption, to set the rates as they currently are. It was leading in our expectation that we would base it on 0.7% and then the adjustments after that. The agency said that they will be making the statement that they would apply this authority if the law were to not change. Therefore, this is the current law. Therefore, it meets the standards. But it's certainly we can follow up and do the analysis and provide the information specific to the adjustment from the 0.7%.
Senator Pratt.
And Mr. Chair, I think this might be a good topic for us to take up in the Legislative Budget Office Oversight Commission to make sure that we are perfectly clear. But I do think, at least for now, we ought to require a new fiscal note.
Senator Pratt, I fully agree. Legislative Budget Oversight Committee ought to be looking at this, because I don't think this is the way we want to do things going forward. So I have two others who wanted to speak, I assume, on this, but I'm not sure. Senator Pappas and Senator Drahenheim.
On a different topic, so if Senator Draheim is on this topic.
I can.
Okay, my question is pretty simple. So if you have, I'm trying to understand this, if you have accrued hours of a certain amount, you have to use up those for your first week of paid family leave. Do you still maintain your 12 weeks, even if you use up PTO for that first week
Mr. Chair?
during the year?
So it would be 12 weeks total for that year, so you use your PTO for week 1, and then you would have another 11 weeks.
Okay, so you lose a week, basically. All right, thank you.
And for those who don't have PTO,
Mr. Chair, for the people who do not have PTO or have less than 80 hours of PTO, the state will pay for the full 12 weeks.
Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair and Senator Mann. I guess I have two questions. First was on the A15, was there any fiscal impact to that A15?
Mr. Chair,
Senator Mann.
there should be, since we're not going to have a PTO buy down anymore, it'll be 12 weeks paid.
Okay, thank you. And Chair, we just got this. I just got this morning. I didn't, came out late last night, and I did not have time to read it this morning before I left to come here. This program is so big and so complicated. I think it deserves us to look at it and have a clear understanding of the fiscal impact. And there's been a lot of questions raised this morning. And I'm still confused, and I'm new, but Chair Marty, I don't understand what takes precedence, the existing statute, the bill we passed last year, or the chapter of law, chapter 41. I think Pratt was trying to get at that. So what, or chapter 40 or 59, right? So what takes precedence? How does that normally work, so I can understand moving forward?
I think, Senator Draheim, that the issue we have is our normal process wasn't done here. And I think that's the concern. I'm not sure that, Chapter 59 is this thing. So, that's what we're, the fiscal note isn't supposed to be trying to make it easier or anything like that. Fiscal note is just supposed to give us the accurate sense, and I don't think we feel we're getting that.
Mr. Chair?
Senator, Mr. Naumann.
I certainly don't want to get in the middle of this complex conversation, but I've heard a couple of pieces of testimony here that maybe I'll just amplify a little bit to see whether or not that is helpful, and if it's not, I'll just sit back. I heard Mr. Larson speak to the fact that there is some disagreement about what the current law actually is. It was the LBO's testimony that the agency believes that they have authority under current law to make the adjustment to a 0.78 rate, and this fiscal note effectively is the first public document that indicates that that is the case. I know it came out in the Milliman study, but this is the conveyance because they are articulating that the agency believes that it has the authority to make this adjustment under current law, and as such, the agency is saying, we will measure the fiscal note and price it against the 0.78. I think you can get into some legal conversations about whether or not that is the case and whether you believe that's the case or whether that was the legislature's intention in the first place. I can't answer some of those questions. I'm not an attorney. But I think therein lies the conversation is, has the agency appropriately reflected what the base is? That's their reading, and the LBO is saying that it meets their uniform standards and procedures because the agency believes they have the authority. I'm not sure if that's helpful, Senator Draheim.
Senator Draheim.
Thank you, and obviously we can't change it right now. We have some great minds in the nonpartisan staff and with the agencies, but I think Senator Pratt's right that moving forward we should have clarity on how we handle this and how we do it, just so we're all on the same page. It's not a political dig at anybody, but I think this is pretty important. This is a huge program. And, you know, it's disappointing, but thank you.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And follow up on Senator Pappas' question, Mr. Rowe, what is the financial impact of the A15? And is that built into the fiscal note?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, it is not built into this Senate file's fiscal note. However, it is substantively similar to the House file, so HF 5363, which also has a fiscal note tied to it. And I think the best way one could understand the impact of this change would be you could take the 2026 values for the Senate file fiscal note, which reflects the PTO standard, which has been articulated here, and then in 2027 and beyond, one could take the House fiscal notes impact.
Mr. How do we have the House fiscal note? How much difference is there because of that? Mr. Nauman, do you have?
Mr. Chair, I can certainly pull up the House fiscal note if it's complete. We'll need a few moments. And if you would like to have it distributed, I can have it printed and handed out for the committee, if Mr. Rowe thinks that that's the appropriate comparison point.
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, I think that would be the closest. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Would it be 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
It should be, Mr. Chair, I apologize. It should be 5-10 minutes, something like that. You could take a break if that's your pleasure.
I think that, Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm not sure that, you know, given that this was the fiscal note that came out last night, and now we're being told to use a House fiscal note instead of what was provided to the committee without time to review it, I would just, Mr. Chair, I would just make the recommendation that we finish reviewing the bill, ask MMB to go back and redraft the fiscal note to the A15 and the statutory 0.7 basis. And we'll be meeting on Monday. I think we can take up the bill and finish it then. So my suggestion would be walk through the bill and then lay it on the table until Monday.
I'm with the sensitivity to the late time. I want to check with Majority Leader and others on what the timing is, because I'm concerned about, I agree, and the only reason for going to the House fiscal note is because that would reflect the difference with the amendment. That's a separate issue from the issue we've been here, and I very much think we have to look at this with the Oversight Committee. But for right now, I would like to keep moving on this, but wonder if people want to see the specifics of the change from that amendment. But maybe we should, for right now, instead of recess and keep going through other concerns about costs, look through the fiscal note and do our job.
And Mr. Chair, that's my recommendation, is we go through the bill, but then we'll lay it on the table until, because, Mr. Chair, I'm just concerned that, this was a fiscal note that came in very late last night. Somewhere probably around 5 o'clock, I think it was. 5:42, thank you, Senator Trey. And now we're being told it doesn't reflect the bill, that we have to go to the House fiscal note, which I'm making the assumption that the department had knowledge of the A15 prior to that, and if not, I think there's enough questions here that we can go through the bill, we can go through the policy changes, come back on Monday before session, and get a clear standard foothold on the fiscal implications going forward.
Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the only advice that I would give for your consideration is for you to make the decision, whatever it is, but include in that decision-making analysis, if we're going to go through the bill today, I don't know if we're going to end up repeating everything again on Monday, because there's nothing that would suggest that any question that gets asked today will satisfy any person, and then we come back on Monday, then we're in the same position because now we're going all the way through it again, and the same questions are going to be asked. So I don't know, and I'm not suggesting which way to go. I would do whatever the chair says, but I just hope that you would think about that as you are pondering this issue.
Thank you. And for now, why don't we just keep moving forward on this, and Mr. Nauman is printing out the House one, which only for the purpose, the only thing we use that for is the purpose of reflecting the impact of the amendment that came today.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I'll just reflect to you, it's a 36-page fiscal note, and we have printed it out. It will take a little bit more than 5 minutes,
Well, we will
I think,
keep,
so.
we have plenty of looking here yet, so. Which, Senator, Mr. Nauman.
Mr. Chair and Senator Draham, where are you looking online?
Okay, continuing questions on the fiscal note. Senator Pratt.
I don't know that we kind of got on this one piece. I don't know that we fully walked through the rest of the fiscal note, and that might be helpful.
Ms. Grunwald-Nogner, you were about to start when we got into a big other discussion. Maybe you could go through it now.
Mr. Chair and members, sure. I can do kind of a high-level overview of the fiscal note and point out where to look for each agency cost. Beginning with the first page, you'll see costs for deed, which are the amounts we were discussing that are reflected on the spreadsheet. And then the costs for the legislature, Metro Council, MMB, and University of Minnesota are all changes to the employer-paid premium rate. So these are changes to the rate compared to 0.78 and the employer share of that rate. So I'll just point out that on page 6, the deed fiscal note details the assumptions made, what the committee was just discussing, and goes into detail about how each of these totals were calculated with assumptions that were made. And I'll skip ahead to page 14. Under Department of Human Services, there isn't a cost shown in the table, but under assumptions, I'll just direct your attention to this paragraph, which is indicating that beginning in fiscal year 2028, there will be a cost to medical assistance in nursing facility payments. But since that is outside of the current budget horizon, it is not being reflected on the fiscal note, but is a long-term cost in their assumptions. And then on page 19, this is beginning the cost to agencies for their employer-paid premium rate. So for the legislature, there's an assumption that beginning in fiscal year 2026, be $10,000 of a cost to the legislature due to the rate change, and that cost is ongoing. On page 22, for the Met Council, again, these are costs reflecting the employer-paid premium rate as impacted by the rate change. In fiscal year 2026, $69,000, and in fiscal year 2027, $141,000. Then finally, on page 34, for the University of Minnesota, this again shows the employer share of premium rate as impacted by the rate change. And in fiscal year 2026, the university reflects a $178,000 cost, and in fiscal year 2027, a $355,000 cost. And I'll just keep it at that, pretty high level, but if members have any questions about the details, I'm happy to go into it or phone any friend of agencies that might be able to speak to it.
Are there questions from the committee? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Nollner. So I'm just trying to reconcile this with the discussion that we've had. So using the University of Minnesota as an example, fiscal 26, they expect to see a $178,000 increase in premium based on going from 0.78 to 0.82. So is it fair to say that that would be $534,000 had we used the 0.7 basis?
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I'm not entirely sure. You stated 541,000?
534. So that would be, so roughly 4 basis points is the total, is the change being reflected. But if we were to use it from the 0.7, we'd be at a 12 basis point change. So I'm just presuming that the 178 is a third of the total cost.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I'm not prepared to discuss, I guess, the change from 0.7 to 0.78. That might be something that is more suited for either for the University of Minnesota or for the Legislative Budget Office.
Mr. Chair, could I?
Well, go ahead, Senator
Could I
Pratt.
ask Mr. Larson that question then?
He'll have,
Yeah, I'll
restate the question.
re-ask it.
Senator Pratt, while he's coming forward, go ahead and restate it.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Mr. Larson, on page 33 of the fiscal note, it shows, and just as an example, it shows the University of Minnesota first-year increase of 178,000, presuming that's going from 0.78 to 0.82, that 4 basis point change. But if we were to base it on the 0.7 and show the full 12 basis point change, would it be fair to say that that would be roughly 3 times that amount at 534,000?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Chair, Mr. Pratt, logically, that makes sense. We could go back and calculate that out. This is, I mean, it's a percentage that we could follow up with.
Presuming that
Sure.
4 basis points is a third of 12 basis points, we should be able to do that simple math.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I believe that's correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Larson. I just wanted to make sure I had the right simple math.
Is there, I mean, I think your math sounds right to me, Senator Pratt. Is there further discussion of the fiscal note? Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I was wondering if we could, even though it's not captured within the fiscal note window, I was wondering if we could get some explanation of the long-term MA costs.
Is that something CBO, LBO can, go ahead, we welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alyssa Holterman-Rosas with the LBO. So the DHS fiscal note reflects the rate changes for nursing facilities, and it's just that those rate changes take an extra 18 months to go into effect. So it would essentially have the same impact that the MMB note or the University of Minnesota note would have. It's just that that's a little bit further out. It's basically for their nursing facility employees.
Thank you.
Senator Pratt, so 2 years, a year and a half later?
Correct, Mr. Chair.
And we don't know how long it'll be till we get the other fiscal. Is there other discussion on the bill, I should ask, on the fiscal note or whatever? Did you email?
Mr. Chair, if there's, oh, sorry, Mr. Mann.
I apologize, Senator. We will we'll do 2 things for the committee. Copies are being made, but we can also email around to each of you the copy of the House fiscal note. And we'll do that now. And that way you can at least look at it and decide what you want to do next. Given the conversations I have had, given the conversations in the committee, I've discussed with the LBO and the agency how quickly it would take to do a fiscal note on the pricing of the A15, and I understand that they feel that they could turn that around in a matter of hours. I don't think it would take terribly long based on the communication that I have had from them. So these are the options I think that might lie in front of you. Advice to staff would be welcome.
Can we get that email to all of the,
It's just been emailed.
yeah, can you email the House fiscal note, which reflects the amendment, which LBO did not have the amendment until last night, so, or whenever this morning, and so I think the more we can get, that would be better if you can just send it out to people and we could begin. It's just gone out to the committee and all the lists served, so we should have it in a minute. Otherwise, we could recess for a few minutes till the printed copy comes. Members okay with? Okay, let's take, yeah, this committee's in recess to the call of the chair, and we'll guess 5 or 10 minutes. Meeting of Senate Finance Committee will come back to order. I think members now have in their packets the House fiscal note, which I'll ask Ms. Grunwald-Noldner to go through in a minute or two, but, and tell us the differences from what would be here. But I want to start going back before that, want to say that I've talked with several other committee members, including Senator Pratt, and I think we feel very much we want to focus on having the Legislative Budget Office Oversight Commission dig into this so we can make sure it doesn't happen again. And Senator Wickland, as chair of that, I just wanted to, let's hope we can get a meeting scheduled this summer to make sure, figure out how to make sure this doesn't happen again. Senator Wickland?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as the chair of the Legislative Budget Office Oversight Commission, yeah, it's very concerning the way this is coming up now, and the kind of the impact when we're at end of session to try and address this. So definitely have my commitment that during the interim, we can refocus on looking into this and how do we put forward, or what do we need to put forward to make sure that it doesn't happen like this again. So I'll definitely, after we get done with session, we'll get that scheduled.
Thank you. And Senator Pratt had suggested that he and I meet with Mr. Larson and the Commissioner of Deed to make sure we don't have this kind of situation happen again. So I think we will set that up, I presume, depending on Senator Pratt, after session, but we will figure that out. Anyway, with that, back to the bill at hand and the fiscal notes. Ms. Grunwald-Noldner, can you go through this one and also reflect, I understand the first year of this may be less because of maybe lower numbers in the Senate bill because of the PTO offset, but if you can go through this and tell us what you think would be different, if anything.
Mr. Chair and members, looking at the two fiscal notes side by side, I believe with the A15 incorporated in Senate File 5430, the fiscal note for the Senate file fiscal year 2026, all of those numbers would stay the same with the A15. So a savings of $5.22 million in fiscal year 26 for deed, and then the costs to agencies for their employer share of the premium rate, those amounts in fiscal year 2026 would remain the same. The change would show up in fiscal year 2027, which would reflect what the House fiscal note on House File 5363 would show. So if you look at the House fiscal note, fiscal year 2027, you'll see that instead of 9.6 million of savings in 2027, there's 24.839 million in savings in fiscal year 2027. And then all of the agencies have increased costs to their employer share. So I'll just walk through them quickly, looking at the first page. For the legislature, instead of 10,000, it's 46,000. For Met Council, instead of 141,000, it's 633,000. For Minnesota Management and Budget, for the general fund, instead of 303,000, it's 1.365 million. For all other funds under MMB, instead of 581,000, it's 2.615 million. And for the University of Minnesota, instead of 355,000 in fiscal year 2027, it's 1.599 million. And I believe once we have a new fiscal note on Senate File 5430 with the A15 incorporated, like I said, it would read as fiscal year 2026 as it appears in the Senate File fiscal note, and 2027 as it appears in the House File fiscal note.
Thank you. Any other things you want to highlight in the House fiscal note, or that's
I think,
for questions, or?
Mr. Chair, the rest of the fiscal note is very similar to the Senate file. It's mainly the numbers that are going to be higher because there's not a PTO provision in the House file. So generally, it should reflect what the A15 would show in fiscal year 2027. So I won't go into detail with each agency, as it'll be very similar, besides the increased numbers.
Questions from members of the committee? Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if Mr. Rowe could come back up again, please.
Mr. Rowe. Go ahead, Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rowe, there's a, if I'm reading this correctly, in the Senate file, you projected a 0.82 in the first year, and I'm having a hard time finding what it is in the second year, and maybe you can correct me. And then in the House file, you've got a premium rate of 0.96, and what that would jump to in the second year. Can you explain what those differences are? And would we expect, what's driving the differences in the two rates between the House file and the Senate file, and what would be the difference in the two rates fiscal year 27?
Mr. Rowe or whoever.
Yes. Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt. I guess maybe just to take a brief step back in terms of what is the source of the rates, right? So these were both based on projections made by the same independent actuary, Milliman Incorporated, which conducted the October actuarial analysis. So it's generally using the same set of assumptions, same understanding about the program design. The initial version of Senate File 5430 before it was amended by the A15, their projection and recommendation was that the initial rate, the initial premium rate to be able to sustain the program using the PTO element would be 0.82% in calendar years 26, 27, and 28. And their projection in 2029 is that the premium rate would need to be 0.87% going forward. That's in part because the Family and Medical Benefit Insurance account is funded at a level higher than is necessary for overall program reserves in the long term. Obviously, the farther out you get in terms of these projections, the more variability is, but that's their best estimate at this point in time. The estimates for, under the provisions of the House file, where the initial week is fully paid, is that in 2026, 27, and 28, you would need to, so the first 3 years, the premium rate would need to be 0.96% to sustain the benefits for the program, and then 1.01% in 2029, in calendar year 2029 and beyond. I think a way you could think about this, obviously we will update the fiscal note in accordance with the A15. Broadly speaking, though, 2026, you can look at the Senate file. 2027 and beyond, you could look at the House file.
Mr. Pratt or Ms. Nogner, did you have anything?
Mr. Chair and members, no, I think, like Mr. Rowe said, I'll just reiterate for fiscal year 2026, the presumed rate would be 0.82%, and then for beginning of fiscal year 2027, the presumed rate would be 0.96%, as Mr. Rowe indicated, and that would stay steady for the next year, and then as the report by Milliman reflects, there would be increases or changes each year depending on the projections that the actuarial study is showing.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Mr. Rowe, let me just make sure I understand. The Senate file with the A15, the projection is a 0.82 in fiscal 26 and a 0.96 in a 14 basis point increase in fiscal 27. And going out until about fiscal 29, where you believe there'd be some sort of increase.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, yes, with one caveat. The actuarial projections are in calendar years, since the program begins on the calendar year. So it's not, so strict, so what I was just saying would be on the calendar year basis, but yes, broadly speaking, yes.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Rowe, the chair and I were discussing during the recess and found something that neither one of us caught immediately. And if I look at the LBO's comment, down at the bottom of the comment, in the Senate file, it says the premium rate of 0.82 in the fiscal note is from the actuarial analysis provided to DEED in April of 2024. In the House file, it says the premium rate of 0.96 in the fiscal note is from the actuarial analysis provided to DEED in February of 2024. So it feels like we're not, one, we're not using the same basis, and two, where did these additional actuarial analyses come from, and who were they shared with?
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, so, you're quoting from the fiscal note, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I guess in terms of the assumption, I think in terms of the assumptions that were used, the actuaries are using similar assumptions to provide a common base here. The letters were the agency requested this analysis as part of sort of ongoing policy development and developing various scenarios for the program. We had, back in February, we'd requested some analyses around what would the fiscal impact be if the initial week was fully paid. In April, as the policy debate was underway, we requested additional information on the PTO provision.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to be clear, the analysis in April and the analysis in February were specific to bill language that was being proposed.
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, and/or policy or various policy considerations that one could look at in program design.
Thank you.
Further discussion from members of the committee. Further questions? Senator Champion, do you want to? Are people ready? Senator Champion, want to move the bill? If so.
I recommend that the bill is passed, and I believe it goes to the floor.
It does. File 5430 as amended be recommended to pass. And I want to restate as we do this that I think our committees would be much more smoothly functioning if we have the same standard, and appreciate LBO's interest in making sure that happens. And I think we have to do that. Further discussion on the bill. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I won't make the motion to table the bill, but I think that would have been the proper procedure. I'm happy, happy's not the right word, right, but I'm satisfied that you and I are on the same page as far as the irregularities of this fiscal note. And I appreciate your concern with it as well as mine. And that's why I think we should, in fact, be laying this over and requesting that DEED do it a different way. This is a big, big program. This is a big, complicated program. And we are going to be sending this to the floor with essentially the first year and every year after that, if you were to think about it, being well below what the true impact to Minnesota business employers and employees are going to be, since this is being a 50% share to the employee and a 50% share to the employer. I think the fiscal note, as drafted in year one, simply hides about 2/3 of that increase from the public that's going to be paying that tax. And between now and the point in time that this comes to the floor, I think we'll be doing a little work to make sure that we can articulate that fact for the Minnesota public when we're in the Senate chamber. And I'm sure you're all looking forward to that. And I want to thank Senator Wickland for for convening the Oversight Commission. I think this is an important question and one that we should never have to face again. And I'm hoping that we can come to some sort of agreement in that committee. I'm going to be requesting members vote no. I think we ought to have the right information in front of us. And with that, Mr. Chair, I think, unless anybody else has anything, I'm ready to go.
Okay. With that, on those on Zoom, which is most of half the committee is on Zoom, please have your cameras on.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Senator.
Might I request a roll call with the results of the roll being printed in the journal?
Sure. By the way, the 3 hands for the second part.
I see Senator Eichhorn's.
Eichhorn's got his hand up too. Just comment that printing in the journal, I'm not sure, I remember that used to be done once every 5 years or so, and now it seems to be every other vote, but it's, for what it's worth, it's people have the right to do that. There's been a request for a roll call. Is there further discussion? Senator Mann, did you have any final comments?
Sure, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank the committee for doing really good work today. I appreciate it very much. But I will also say that it is a big program, but it's not that complicated. It just isn't. The rest of the entire world does this. And we're, again, state number 13. So it's not new. It's not a new idea. It's been done. It's a good, durable, sustainable program. It's going to really help people's lives. We're going to make sure that people can have their babies and get sick and take care of themselves and their families and not go bankrupt, and that's a really big deal. So again, thank you for your work, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. So the staff will take the roll.
Senator Marty?
Aye.
Senator Friends? Senator Pratt?
No.
Senator Champion?
Aye.
Senator Dames?
No.
Senator Draheim?
No.
Senator Eichhorn?
Eichhorn votes no.
Senator Mohammed? Senator Murphy?
Yes.
Senator Pappas?
Yes.
Senator Westrom? Senator Wickland?
Yes.
Senator Friends?
Yes.
Senator Mohammed? Senator Westrom?
There being 6 ayes and 4 nays, the motion prevails, and the bill moves on to the floor, and the result will be printed in the journal. And we will follow up with making sure we don't have this problem again with LBO and the agency. Mr. Senator Pratt, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you update the committee on what we're looking for on Monday?
Yes, Monday we are planning to convene at 10:30 a.m. on the Uber Lyft bill. It's going to be in this same room. And I think that's the only bill we have scheduled for Monday. So that in session, I don't think starts till 1:30, 1 o'clock or something, so we will deal with this before that. So, if there's no further business, this meeting's adjourned, and I hope people have a chance to get some of the nice weather this weekend.